As the first pale light of dawn creeps through the narrow slits that pass for windows in your humble dwelling, you begin to stir from what can generously be called sleep. The straw beneath you has shifted and compressed during the night, leaving uncomfortable lumps pressing against your ribs and shoulders. Your woolen blanket, rough and scratchy against your skin, has barely kept the morning chill at bay. The air in your small room carries the lingering scent of yesterday's cooking fire, mixed with something far less pleasant that you've learned not to think about too deeply. You lie still for a moment, listening to the sounds that mark the beginning of another day in medieval life. From somewhere nearby comes the soft lowing of cattle, their breath visible in small puffs in the cold morning air. A rooster crows with determined enthusiasm, followed by another and then another, as if the entire village has decided to participate in this dawn chorus. The sound of wooden shutters creaking open drifts through the thin walls, accompanied by the gentle murmur of neighbors beginning their daily routines. Your feet touch the earthen floor, and the cold immediately shoots up through your legs. The packed dirt beneath your bare feet is uneven and slightly damp from the night's moisture. You reach for your clothes, folded carefully on a wooden chest that serves as both storage and seating. The fabric feels stiff and cold, having absorbed the night air. As you dress, you're reminded of how different this morning routine is from anything you might have imagined. Each piece of clothing serves a purpose beyond mere modesty or fashion. Every layer is a barrier against a world that seems determined to make you uncomfortable. Your tunic, made of coarse linen that your wife spun and wove herself, slides over your head with a rustling sound. The fabric, while clean, has a texture that modern skin would find remarkably rough. It's been washed in the river with ash soap, beaten against rocks to remove the dirt, and dried in whatever weather happened to be available. The result is functional, certainly, but comfort was never the primary consideration. Over this goes your outer tunic, slightly longer and made of wool that still carries the faint scent of the sheep it came from. As you dress, you become acutely aware of how different your relationship with cleanliness and comfort has become. The notion of a daily shower, or even weekly bathing, belongs to a world you can barely remember. Your last proper wash was perhaps a month ago, and that involved heated water in a wooden tub that served the entire household. Instead, you make do with occasional splashing of cold water on your face and hands, using a rough cloth that has seen better days. Your stomach announces itself with a long, hollow rumble that echoes slightly in the small room. Hunger in medieval times carries a weight that modern minds struggle to comprehend. It's not the manageable hunger of delayed meals or dietary choices, but something more constant and insistent. Your body has adapted to expect less, to make do with what's available, but the emptiness still gnaws at you with familiar persistence. You make your way to the small area that serves as your kitchen, your feet navigating the uneven floor with practiced ease. The fire from last night has died to barely glowing embers, leaving the room significantly colder than when you went to sleep. Starting a fire in medieval times is not the simple matter of striking a match or turning a dial. Instead, you kneel beside the stone-lined fire pit, gathering small pieces of dried tinder and kindling that you carefully prepared and stored the evening before. The process requires patience and skill that has been learned through countless repetitions. You blow gently on the embers, coaxing them back to life with steady, measured breaths. Small wisps of smoke rise, making your eyes water slightly. The acrid smell fills your nostrils as you carefully add tiny pieces of dry grass and wood shavings. After several minutes of careful tending, a small flame finally catches, and you gradually add larger pieces of wood until a proper fire begins to warm the space around you. The smoke, having nowhere else to go, fills much of the room before eventually finding its way out through a simple hole in the roof. Your eyes adjust to the haze, but the constant exposure to wood smoke has left them slightly irritated and red-rimmed. This is simply the reality of indoor fires without proper chimneys, a trade-off between warmth and clear air that medieval people accepted without question. With the fire established, you turn your attention to the morning meal. Breakfast, as you might understand it, doesn't really exist in your medieval world. Instead, you'll break your fast with whatever happens to be available, which varies dramatically depending on the season, your social status, and the success of recent harvests. This morning, like most mornings, your options are limited but familiar. From a wooden shelf, you retrieve a small loaf of bread that was baked several days ago. The crust has hardened considerably, requiring you to tap it against the shelf to check its solidity. The sound it makes is more like knocking on wood than anything you'd associate with food. This bread, made primarily from rye and barley, with perhaps a small amount of wheat if you were fortunate, has become your daily companion in the ongoing challenge of nutrition. You place the bread near the fire to warm it slightly, hoping to soften the crust enough to make it edible without risking damage to your teeth. Medieval bread was often baked in large batches and stored for days or even weeks, gradually becoming harder and harder until it required soaking in liquid to be consumed safely. The phrase, upper crust, comes from these times, when the top of the loaf was reserved for honored guests, while the family made do with the harder, less appealing bottom portions. While the bread warms, you pour a small amount of ale into a wooden cup. The ale, weak and slightly sour, serves as your morning beverage not out of preference, but out of necessity. Water, even from supposedly clean sources, carries risks that medieval people understood intuitively, even without knowledge of bacteria or contamination. Ale, having been boiled during its preparation, offers a safer alternative, though its alcohol content is minimal, just enough to provide some protection against harmful organisms. The ale tastes of barley and herbs, with an underlying flatness that speaks of its age and simple preparation. It's not particularly refreshing, but it serves its purpose, providing both liquid and a small amount of nutrition to start your day. You drink slowly, savoring the relative warmth it provides as it travels down your throat. Your breakfast bread, now slightly softened by the fire's warmth, tears apart with some effort. The interior reveals a dense, dark crumb that's quite different from any bread you might have known in another life. It's heavy and filling, with a slightly sour taste that reflects the natural fermentation process used in its creation. Small bits of grain and occasional pieces of chaff remind you of its humble origins and simple preparation. As you eat, you're joined by other members of your household, your wife, perhaps a child or two, and possibly an elderly parent who shares your dwelling. The morning meal is a quiet affair, each person focused on the practical business of taking in enough food to fuel the day's work ahead. Conversation, when it occurs, tends toward immediate concerns: the weather, tasks that need completion, problems that require attention. Your wife moves about the small space with efficient familiarity, tending to the fire, preparing portions for the children, and organizing the day's work. Her movements are economical and purposeful, refined by years of making the most of limited resources and cramped quarters. She wears her hair covered, as is proper, and her dress, though clean, shows the wear and careful mending that marks clothing meant to last for years rather than seasons. The children, if present, display the particular mixture of energy and hunger that characterizes young people in any era, though their small faces show the lean look common to medieval childhoods. They eat their portions quickly and completely, wasting nothing, having learned early that food is precious and not to be taken for granted. Their clothing, like yours, is practical rather than decorative, sturdy fabrics and earth tones that hide stains and wear well under constant use. As the meal progresses, you become increasingly aware of the sounds filtering in from outside your dwelling. The village is awakening in earnest now, and the noise level rises accordingly. Dogs bark in the distance, their voices echoing off the wooden and stone buildings. Cartwheels creak along the rutted paths that serve as roads, accompanied by the steady clip-clop of horse and ox hooves. Voices call out greetings, instructions, and occasional arguments as neighbors begin their daily interactions. The sound of church bells begins to ring across the village, their bronze voices calling the faithful to morning prayers. The bells, cast by skilled craftsmen and blessed by the church, represent one of the few beautiful sounds in a world otherwise dominated by the practical noise of survival. Their clear tones rise above the earthier sounds of animals and work, reminding everyone of the spiritual dimension that governs medieval life. You know that attending morning prayers is not optional. It's both a religious obligation and a social expectation that binds the community together. The church serves as the center of village life, providing not just spiritual guidance, but also news, social connection, and a sense of shared purpose that helps medieval people cope with the challenges of their daily existence. After finishing your meager breakfast, you step outside into the morning air. The temperature hits you immediately, a sharp, clean cold that makes you pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The sky, visible between the overhanging upper stories of neighboring buildings, shows the pale gray blue of early morning, with wisps of cloud drifting slowly across the horizon. The street outside your door is not paved in any sense you might recognize. Instead, it's a mixture of packed earth, straw, and various organic materials that have been trampled into a relatively solid surface by countless feet, hooves, and cartwheels. The surface is uneven and, depending on recent weather, can range from dusty and hard to muddy and treacherous. This morning, a light frost has left everything slightly slippery, requiring careful attention to your footing. The smell of the village greets you as you emerge, a complex mixture of wood smoke, cooking food, animals, and human habitation that creates an olfactory landscape entirely unfamiliar to modern senses. It's not necessarily unpleasant, but it's certainly intense and ever-present. Your nose, having adapted over time, no longer registers many of these scents consciously, but a visitor from another era would find them overwhelming. As you make your way toward the church, you encounter your neighbors beginning their own daily routines. The baker, if your village is large enough to support one, has been awake since well before dawn, tending his ovens and preparing the day's bread. The smell of baking bread, when it reaches you, provides a welcome contrast to the other village odors and reminds you of one of the few reliable pleasures in medieval life. The blacksmith's forge glows red in the pre-dawn darkness, and the rhythmic sound of hammer on anvil has already begun. Metalwork in medieval times requires starting early to make the most of daylight hours, and the smith's work is too valuable to the community to waste time. The bright orange sparks that fly from his anvil create brief moments of beauty in the gray morning, tiny stars that live for seconds before falling dark to the ground. Women emerge from their homes carrying water jugs, heading toward the village well or stream to collect the day's supply of water. This task, performed multiple times daily, requires significant physical effort and time. The water, once collected, must be carried back over uneven ground, upstairs, and into storage containers that serve the household until the next trip becomes necessary. The well itself serves as an informal gathering place where news and gossip are exchanged along with morning greetings. Women balance heavy water jugs while discussing everything from family concerns to village politics, their conversations providing the informal communication network that keeps medieval communities informed and connected. Children run between the adults, their voices adding a higher pitch to the morning sound mixture. They dodge between cartwheels and animal legs with practiced ease, having learned early how to navigate the crowded, chaotic environment of village streets. Their games, when time permits, tend to be simple and require no manufactured toys, running, hiding, making up stories, and imitating the adult activities they observe daily. The animals that share village life are everywhere, contributing their own sounds and movements to the morning bustle. Chickens scratch and peck in the dirt, searching for anything edible and occasionally erupting into brief, feathered disputes over particularly promising finds. Pigs root through refuse piles, their snorts and squeals adding to the audio landscape. Goats and sheep, if present, bleat and baa as they're led to whatever grazing areas are available. Dogs, many of them working animals rather than pets, trot through the streets with purpose. They serve as guards, helpers, and companions, but their lives are practical rather than pampered. Their barking provides an early warning system for the village, alerting residents to strangers, unusual activities, or potential threats. As you walk toward the church, your feet navigate the uneven street surface automatically. Medieval streets were not planned in any systematic way, instead developing organically as buildings were constructed and paths were worn by foot traffic. The result is a maze of narrow passages, sudden turns, and irregular spaces that can be confusing to newcomers but become familiar territory for residents. The buildings you pass show the characteristic signs of medieval construction: wooden frames filled with wattle and daub, small windows, and overhanging upper stories that nearly meet across the narrow streets. The wood has weathered to various shades of gray and brown, and the plaster between the timber beams shows cracks and patches where repairs have been made over the years. Each building serves multiple purposes, with living spaces above workshops or shops and small yards behind that house, animals, gardens, and storage areas. Privacy, as a modern concept, barely exists. Thin walls and close quarters mean that everyone knows everyone else's business, for better or worse. The church building looms ahead, its stone construction marking it as one of the most substantial structures in the village. The stones, cut and fitted by skilled masons, have been darkened by weather and age, giving the building a sense of permanence and authority that stands in stark contrast to the more temporary feeling wooden structures around it. The church bells continue their call, their bronze voices now joined by the sound of footsteps as villagers converge on the building from all directions. Morning prayers represent one of the few times when the entire community gathers in one place, creating a sense of shared purpose and collective identity that helps bind medieval society together. As you approach the church entrance, you remove your cap or hood, following the customs of respect and reverence that govern religious spaces. The heavy wooden doors, carved with simple but meaningful decorations, stand open to receive the faithful. The interior, lit by candles and oil lamps, glows with warm, flickering light that contrasts sharply with the gray morning outside. The stone floor inside feels cold even through your shoes, and your breath forms small puffs of vapor in the unheated space. Medieval churches were not comfortable in any physical sense. They were designed to inspire awe and reverence rather than bodily comfort. The high ceiling and stone walls create an acoustic environment where every sound echoes and amplifies, making whispered prayers seem to fill the entire space. You find your accustomed place among the other villagers, men and women separated according to custom, everyone standing throughout the service. There are no pews or chairs. Medieval congregations stood, knelt, or sat on the floor as the liturgy required. The physical discomfort of standing on cold stone for extended periods is simply accepted as part of the religious experience. The priest, dressed in his ceremonial robes, begins the morning prayers in Latin, a language that few, if any, of the congregation understand, but which carries the weight of tradition and authority. The familiar rhythms and cadences of the prayers provide comfort and continuity, connecting this morning service to countless others stretching back through generations. The incense, when it appears, adds its distinctive scent to the church atmosphere. The sweet, resinous smoke rises in delicate spirals, creating visual beauty and marking the sacred nature of the space and time. Your eyes may water slightly from the smoke, but the sensory experience helps transport you from the mundane concerns of daily survival to contemplation of higher purposes. As the service progresses, you find yourself surrounded by the same faces you see every day: the baker, the blacksmith, the miller, neighbors and relatives and acquaintances who make up the small world of your village. Their faces, lit by candlelight and showing the effects of hard work and simple living, reflect the shared challenges and common faith that bind your community together. The prayers themselves, while incomprehensible in their Latin form, follow patterns that have become familiar through repetition. You know when to bow your head, when to cross yourself, when to kneel on the cold stone floor. These physical actions, performed in unison with your neighbors, create a sense of participation, even when the words themselves remain mysterious. The priest's voice, trained to carry throughout the stone space, rises and falls with the ancient rhythms of the liturgy. His pronunciation of the Latin words carries the particular accent and inflection of your region, making even this universal language somehow local and familiar. When he speaks in the common tongue, his words address the practical concerns of village life. Reminders about feast days, announcements about community obligations, gentle exhortations toward charity and proper behavior. As the service continues, you become aware of the small sounds that accompany communal worship: the rustling of clothing as people shift position, the soft footsteps of latecomers finding places, the occasional cough or cleared throat echoing off the stone walls. These human sounds, mixed with the formal words of prayer, remind you that this sacred time is shared by people dealing with the same daily challenges you face. The morning light, filtering through the small windows, gradually strengthens during the service. The colored glass, if your church is wealthy enough to possess any, casts patches of blue and red and gold onto the stone walls and floor. More likely, the windows are simple openings, fitted with oiled cloth or thin sheets of horn that let in light while keeping out the worst of the weather. When the service finally concludes, the congregation disperses slowly, people lingering to exchange quiet words with neighbors and friends. These brief conversations serve important social functions: sharing news, making plans, offering help, or asking for assistance. The church steps and surrounding area become an informal market of information and social connection. As you emerge from the church back into the brightening morning, the day's work awaits. The brief respite of communal worship is over, and the practical demands of survival reassert themselves. Your stomach, having processed its small breakfast, begins to remind you that the next meal is many hours away and will depend on the success of today's labor. The sun, now fully risen, reveals the village in its morning activity. Smoke rises from chimneys and fire pits as households begin cooking and working. The sound level has increased significantly since your early rising. Cartwheels, animal noises, human voices, and the various sounds of crafts and trades create a constant background of activity. You make your way back toward your dwelling, but the day's work will soon call you elsewhere. Whether your labor involves farming, crafts, trade, or service, it will demand most of your waking hours and much of your physical and mental energy. The medieval day is structured around work, not work as modern people might understand it, with regular hours and defined breaks, but the continuous effort required to extract survival from an often unwilling world. The morning mist, if any lingered from the night, has begun to dissipate under the strengthening sun. The air carries the sense of wood smoke, cooking food, and the various activities of village life. Your nose, adapted to these smells, registers them without conscious thought, but they form an olfactory map of your community and its daily rhythms. As you walk through the village streets, you observe the intricate dance of medieval morning activity. Everyone has tasks that must be completed, and everyone knows their role in the complex web of interdependence that keeps the community functioning. The baker provides bread, the blacksmith maintains tools, the miller processes grain, and each household contributes its labor to the collective effort of survival. The children you see are not in school. Formal education is a luxury available only to the wealthy or those destined for religious life. Instead, they learn by observation and participation, gradually taking on more and more responsibility as they grow. A boy might help his father with farming or crafts, while a girl learns from her mother the complex skills of household management, textile production, and food preparation. The women you encounter carry the particular burden of medieval life. They are responsible not only for their households, but often for contributing to family income through various forms of work. They might spin thread, weave cloth, brew ale, raise chickens, tend gardens, or engage in small-scale trade. Their days are filled from dawn to dusk with tasks that require both physical strength and considerable skill. The men, depending on their occupation, face their own challenges. Farmers contend with weather, soil quality, and the constant threat of crop failure. Craftsmen work with simple tools and techniques passed down through generations, producing goods that must meet community needs with available materials. Merchants face the risks of travel and trade in a world where roads are poor and safety is never guaranteed. As the morning progresses toward midday, the tempo of village life increases. The initial slow stirring of dawn has given way to the focused activity of people pursuing their daily labor. The sounds, smells, and sights of medieval morning have created the foundation for another day of the hard work that characterizes life in these times. As the service continues, you become aware of the small sounds that accompany communal worship. The rustling of clothing as people shift position, the soft footsteps of latecomers finding places, the occasional cough or cleared throat echoing off the stone walls. These human sounds, mixed with the formal words of prayer, remind you that this sacred time is shared by people dealing with the same daily challenges you face. The morning light, filtering through the small windows, gradually strengthens during the service. The colored glass, if your church is wealthy enough to possess any, casts patches of blue and red and gold onto the stone walls and floor. More likely, the windows are simple openings, fitted with oiled cloth or thin sheets of horn that let in light while keeping out the worst of the weather. When the service finally concludes, the congregation disperses slowly, people lingering to exchange quiet words with neighbors and friends. These brief conversations serve important social functions, sharing news, making plans, offering help, or asking for assistance. The church steps and surrounding area become an informal market of information and social connection. As you emerge from the church back into the brightening morning, the day's work awaits. The brief respite of communal worship is over, and the practical demands of survival reassert themselves. Your stomach, having processed its small breakfast, begins to remind you that the next meal is many hours away and will depend on the success of today's labor. The sun, now fully risen, reveals the village in its morning activity. Smoke rises from chimneys and fire pits as households begin cooking and working. The sound level has increased significantly since your early rising. Cartwheels, animal noises, human voices, and the various sounds of crafts and trades create a constant background of activity. You make your way back toward your dwelling, but the day's work will soon call you elsewhere. Whether your labor involves farming, crafts, trade, or service, it will demand most of your waking hours and much of your physical and mental energy. The medieval day is structured around work, not work as modern people might understand it, with regular hours and defined breaks, but the continuous effort required to extract survival from an often unwilling world. The morning mist, if any lingered from the night, has begun to dissipate under the strengthening sun. The air carries the sense of wood smoke, cooking food, and the various activities of village life. Your nose, adapted to these smells, registers them without conscious thought, but they form an olfactory map of your community and its daily rhythms. As you walk through the village streets, you observe the intricate dance of medieval morning activity. Everyone has tasks that must be completed, and everyone knows their role in the complex web of interdependence that keeps the community functioning. The baker provides bread, the blacksmith maintains tools, the miller processes grain, and each household contributes its labor to the collective effort of survival. The children you see are not in school. Formal education is a luxury available only to the wealthy or those destined for religious life. Instead, they learn by observation and participation, gradually taking on more and more responsibility as they grow. A boy might help his father with farming or crafts, while a girl learns from her mother the complex skills of household management, textile production, and food preparation. The women you encounter carry the particular burden of medieval life. They are responsible not only for their households, but often for contributing to family income through various forms of work. They might spin thread, weave cloth, brew ale, raise chickens, tend gardens, or engage in small-scale trade. Their days are filled from dawn to dusk with tasks that require both physical strength and considerable skill. The men, depending on their occupation, face their own challenges. Farmers contend with weather, soil quality, and the constant threat of crop failure. Craftsmen work with simple tools and techniques passed down through generations, producing goods that must meet community needs with available materials. Merchants face the risks of travel and trade in a world where roads are poor and safety is never guaranteed. As the morning progresses toward midday, the tempo of village life increases. The initial slow stirring of dawn has given way to the focused activity of people pursuing their daily labor. The sounds, smells, and sights of medieval morning have created the foundation for another day of the hard work that characterizes life in these times. As the afternoon sun filters through the narrow windows of your modest dwelling, you become increasingly aware of something that modern minds can barely comprehend: the complete absence of what you once knew as cleanliness. The very concept of hygiene, as it would be understood in other eras, simply doesn't exist in your medieval world. Instead, you inhabit a reality where the human relationship with cleanliness follows entirely different rules, shaped by necessity, ignorance, and deeply held beliefs that would seem utterly foreign to contemporary sensibilities. You sit on your simple wooden stool, mending a tear in your woolen tunic, when the afternoon breeze carries through your dwelling a mixture of scents that tells the story of medieval life. There's the ever-present wood smoke from countless fires, the earthy smell of animals in their waste, the sharp tang of unwashed bodies and clothing, and underneath it all, the complex organic aroma of a world where waste disposal is a luxury that most cannot afford. Your own body has adapted to this olfactory landscape over the months and years of medieval living. The modern concept of daily bathing belongs to a world you can barely remember. Instead, your relationship with water and cleanliness follows patterns that would horrify visitors from other times, but which represent the practical reality of life in an age where hot water is a precious commodity and privacy is almost unknown. The last time you experienced what could generously be called a bath was perhaps 6 weeks ago, during the warmer weather of late summer. Even then, the process bore little resemblance to the cleansing rituals of other eras. Water had to be heated laboriously over the fire, one pot at a time, and poured into a wooden tub that served the entire household. The water itself, drawn from the village well or nearby stream, carried its own collection of particles, organisms, and dissolved minerals that left it far from the clear, treated liquid that other times might take for granted. That bath, such as it was, took place in the main room of your dwelling, with family members taking turns in the same water, each subsequent bather inheriting whatever the previous person had left behind. Privacy was achieved by hanging a rough cloth across one corner of the room, creating a temporary barrier that provided visual concealment, but little else. The water, by the time it reached the last family member, had taken on a distinctly murky appearance and a complex bouquet of human essences. The soap available for such occasions was nothing like the refined cleansing products of other eras. Instead, you used a harsh mixture of animal fat and ash that had been processed into a grayish, gritty substance that removed dirt through sheer abrasive action rather than any gentle cleansing properties. This soap, made in small batches when fat was available and wood ash had been properly prepared, had to serve for washing both bodies and clothing, and its scarcity made it too valuable to use generously. The process of washing with this primitive soap was an ordeal in itself. The mixture burned slightly when applied to skin, especially if that skin bore any small cuts or scratches from daily work. It left behind a residue that never quite rinsed clean, and its smell, a combination of rancid fat and alkaline ash, clung to whatever it touched for days afterward. Your skin, after such a washing, felt simultaneously cleaner and more irritated, trading one form of discomfort for another. Between these infrequent bathing opportunities, your personal hygiene routine consists of what can only be described as maintenance rather than cleanliness. Each morning, if water is available and weather permits, you might splash a small amount of cold water on your face and hands, using a rough cloth that has served this purpose for weeks without proper washing. The water, drawn from whatever source is most convenient, often carries its own collection of particulates and organisms that leave your skin feeling different rather than necessarily cleaner. Your teeth, those that remain, present their own challenges in a world without toothbrushes, toothpaste, or any understanding of dental hygiene as other eras might recognize it. Instead, you occasionally rub them with a frayed stick or a rough cloth, sometimes dipped in salt if that precious commodity is available. The taste this leaves in your mouth is harsh and gritty, and the process often causes your gums to bleed slightly, but it represents the extent of dental care available to most medieval people. The condition of your mouth tells the story of medieval nutrition and hygiene in ways that are both subtle and dramatic. Your teeth, subjected to years of coarse bread, filled with grit from stone-ground grain, show significant wear and damage. Several have developed cavities that cause intermittent pain, and others have been lost entirely to decay or injury. Your gums, irritated by poor nutrition and primitive cleaning methods, are often swollen and tender to the touch. Your breath, to put it kindly, carries the accumulated effects of this limited dental care, combined with a diet heavy in fermented foods, ale, and whatever vegetables happen to be available. The concept of fresh breath belongs to a world with different priorities and possibilities. Instead, you've learned to accept and ignore the various oral odors that characterize medieval life, both your own and those of everyone around you. Your hair presents another frontier in the ongoing challenge of medieval hygiene. Washing hair requires even more water and effort than bathing the body, making it an infrequent luxury rather than a regular practice. Instead, your hair receives attention primarily through combing with a wooden or bone comb that serves the dual purpose of removing tangles and eliminating the various small creatures that have taken up residence in your scalp. These uninvited guests, lice primarily, but occasionally other parasites like fleas, mites, and various species of microscopic creatures that medieval understanding cannot even begin to identify, represent one of the most persistent and democratic aspects of medieval life. Rich and poor, noble and peasant, all serve as hosts to these industrious insects that thrive in the warm, unwashed environment of medieval hair and clothing. The constant itching they produce has become such a normal part of life that you barely notice it consciously, though your hands frequently move to scratch various parts of your scalp and body throughout the day. The hierarchy of infestation follows its own social patterns. Head lice prefer the warm, oily environment of unwashed hair and are passed easily from person to person through shared combs, head coverings, or simple proximity. Body lice, larger and more aggressive, live in the seams of clothing and emerge to feed on human blood, leaving behind red, irritated bite marks and an almost irresistible urge to scratch. Fleas, carried by the dogs and cats that share medieval living spaces, leap freely between animal and human hosts, finding both equally hospitable. The seasonal patterns of parasitic activity add another layer to medieval hygiene challenges. Summer months bring increased activity as warmth accelerates breeding cycles, while winter months drive the creatures deeper into clothing and bedding, seeking warmth and creating more intimate contact with their human hosts. Spring, with its warming temperatures and increased bathing opportunities, offers temporary relief as some parasites are washed away, only to be replaced by new populations as the cycle begins again. The process of delousing, when it becomes absolutely necessary, involves patient examination of each strand of hair, searching for the tiny eggs that the creatures attach with remarkable tenacity. Family members often help each other with this task, creating intimate moments of mutual grooming that serve both practical and social functions. The eggs, when found, must be crushed between fingernails or scraped away with a fine-toothed comb designed specifically for this purpose. Your clothing, worn continuously for weeks or months between washings, has become a complex ecosystem of human odors, food stains, and microscopic life forms. The rough woolen and linen fabrics absorb and retain everything they encounter: sweat from physical labor, smoke from countless fires, food spills from meals eaten without modern utensils, and the general grime of medieval living. When clothing does receive washing, the process bears little resemblance to the convenient cleaning methods of other eras. Instead, garments are taken to a stream or river, where they are soaked in cold water and beaten with wooden paddles or stones to dislodge embedded dirt. The ash soap, when available, is applied sparingly and scrubbed in with rough brushes made from bundled twigs or coarse cloth. The washing process itself takes most of a day and requires considerable physical effort. Wet wool and linen are surprisingly heavy, and the repeated lifting, wringing, and beating required to clean them properly is exhausting work. The results, while representing a significant improvement over completely unwashed garments, still fall far short of what other eras might consider clean. The fabric retains many stains and odors, and the harsh washing process gradually weakens and roughens the material. Drying the washed clothing presents its own challenges, especially during the colder months when outdoor drying is impractical. Wet garments hung inside the dwelling create additional humidity and take days to dry completely, during which time they contribute their damp, somewhat musty scent to the indoor atmosphere. The fabric, when finally dry, has often stiffened considerably and requires vigorous shaking and manipulation to restore any semblance of flexibility. Your undergarments, simple linen shirts and leg coverings that serve as the first layer between your body and your outer clothing, receive even less frequent washing than your visible garments. These items, worn directly against your skin, absorb the most intimate evidence of medieval living and develop a complexity of odors and stains that would challenge even the most robust modern cleaning methods. The concept of changing undergarments regularly belongs to a world with different resources and priorities. Instead, these items are worn until they literally fall apart or become so uncomfortable that their replacement becomes unavoidable. The process of acquiring new undergarments involves either the time-consuming work of spinning thread, weaving cloth, and sewing new items, or the expense of purchasing them from someone else who has done this work. Your feet, enclosed in simple leather shoes or boots that receive no regular cleaning or maintenance, exist in their own microclimate of moisture, warmth, and organic material. The leather, softened by constant wear and dampened by sweat and occasional exposure to water, has developed a distinctive aroma that announces your approach to anyone with functioning nostrils. The interior of your shoes has become lined with a mixture of sweat, dead skin, and various organic particles picked up during daily activities. This material, compressed by the weight of your body and moistened by perspiration, creates an environment that would fascinate microbiologists of other eras. The smell that emerges when you remove your shoes at the end of the day represents a concentrated essence of medieval foot hygiene that few modern noses could tolerate. Your socks, if you possess such luxuries, are simple wrappings of cloth that serve more to prevent chafing than to absorb moisture or provide cushioning. These wrappings, like your other undergarments, are washed infrequently and develop their own characteristic patina of use. The process of unwrapping your feet at the end of a long day releases odors that have been confined and concentrated within your shoes, creating an olfactory experience that serves as a daily reminder of medieval hygiene limitations. The condition of your fingernails tells another story of medieval cleanliness standards. Without proper tools for trimming or cleaning, your nails grow until they break naturally, often leaving rough, jagged edges that snag on clothing and skin. The accumulated dirt beneath your nails represents a comprehensive sample of everything you've touched over recent weeks: soil from farming, soot from fires, food particles from meals, and various organic materials from daily tasks. Cleaning beneath your fingernails requires improvised tools, perhaps a small knife point or a sharpened piece of wood, and the process often results in cuts or injuries that introduce new opportunities for infection and discomfort. The concept of manicured nails belongs to a world with different priorities and possibilities. Instead, your nails serve as practical tools for scratching, scraping, and manipulating small objects, and their appearance reflects this utilitarian purpose. Your overall skin condition bears the accumulated effects of limited washing, harsh soap, rough clothing, and constant exposure to smoke, dirt, and the elements. What modern dermatologists might recognize as various forms of dermatitis, you simply accept as the normal state of human skin. Dry patches, areas of irritation, small cuts and scrapes that heal slowly in the absence of proper cleaning, and the overall roughened texture of skin exposed to constant friction from unwashed clothing. All of these represent the baseline condition of medieval skin care. The seasonal changes bring their own dermatological challenges. Winter months create painful cracks in exposed skin, particularly on hands and face, as cold air and constant exposure to smoke dry out what little natural oils remain. These cracks often become infected, creating weeping sores that attract dirt and refuse to heal properly. Summer brings its own problems: heat rash from heavy clothing worn in warm weather, infected insect bites that are scratched open repeatedly, and sun damage from outdoor work without any form of protection. The occupational hazards of medieval work leave their permanent marks on your skin. If you work with metals, your hands show the characteristic burns and cuts from hot materials and sharp tools. Agricultural work leaves its own signature: permanent dirt staining under fingernails, calluses that crack and bleed, and the distinctive marks left by constant contact with rough tools and plant materials. Textile work creates its own patterns of wear: fingertips worn smooth from spinning, small cuts from weaving implements, and the peculiar staining that comes from various dyes and mordants used in cloth production. The absence of what other eras might call skincare products means that cuts, scratches, and irritations are left to heal on their own, often with less than optimal results. Small wounds collect dirt and debris, become infected, and leave scars that mark your body with the history of medieval living. Your hands, in particular, show the effects of constant work without gloves, developing calluses, cuts, and permanent staining from various tasks and materials. The medieval understanding of personal hygiene operates according to principles that would seem bizarre to other eras. Water, especially hot water, is considered potentially dangerous to health. The widely held belief that bathing opens the pores and allows disease-causing vapors to enter the body means that excessive cleanliness is viewed with suspicion rather than admiration. Instead of frequent washing, medieval hygiene relies heavily on changing clothing when such changes are possible, and masking odors with stronger, more pleasant scents. Herbs and flowers, when available, are tucked into clothing or rubbed on the skin to provide aromatic camouflage for natural human odors. Perfumes, for those wealthy enough to afford them, serve a similar function, creating olfactory layers that disguise rather than eliminate underlying scents. The communal aspects of medieval hygiene create their own challenges and social dynamics. Public bathhouses, where they exist, serve entire communities with the same water, changed infrequently, and shared by dozens of bathers throughout the day. The progression of water quality from morning to evening tells its own story. What begins as relatively clean, hot water gradually becomes a complex soup of human essences, soap residue, and various substances that medieval bathers bring with them. The social protocols surrounding these establishments, who bathes when, in what order, and with what degree of privacy, reflect medieval attitudes toward cleanliness, modesty, and social hierarchy. Wealthy patrons often claim the morning hours when the water is cleanest, while the poor and working classes make do with afternoon and evening slots when the water has accumulated the contributions of many previous bathers. The bathhouse keeper, responsible for maintaining order and collecting fees, develops a particular tolerance for the various states of human cleanliness and the creative ways people attempt to extend their bathing time without paying additional fees. The physical structure of medieval bathhouses creates its own hygiene challenges. Wooden floors, constantly wet and inadequately drained, develop a soft, spongy quality that speaks of accumulated moisture and organic matter. The walls, repeatedly splashed with soapy water and human fluids, develop their own ecosystem of mold, mildew, and various microorganisms that thrive in the warm, humid environment. Wooden benches and bathing vessels, shared by countless users and cleaned only occasionally, acquire a patina of use that would challenge even medieval standards of acceptability. These bathhouses, while offering the luxury of hot water and purpose-built facilities, also serve as efficient distribution centers for various skin conditions, parasites, and communicable diseases. The same warm, moist environment that makes bathing pleasant also provides ideal conditions for organisms that medieval medicine is powerless to identify or treat effectively. Your dwelling itself reflects medieval attitudes toward cleanliness and waste management in ways that permeate every aspect of daily life. Floors of packed earth or rough planks are swept occasionally with twig brooms, but the concept of mopping or deep cleaning belongs to a world with different tools and standards. Spilled food, tracked in mud, and various organic materials gradually become part of the floor surface, creating a patina of use that tells the story of daily life through layers of accumulated debris. The corners of rooms, difficult to reach with primitive cleaning tools, become repositories for dust, food scraps, small bones from meals, and various organic materials that slowly decompose and contribute their own distinctive aromas to the indoor atmosphere. These corners also provide shelter for mice, rats, and insects that share your living space and contribute their own waste products to the household ecosystem. The walls, typically made of wattle and daub or rough stone, absorb and retain odors with remarkable efficiency. Years of cooking fires, human habitation, and various domestic activities have penetrated deeply into the porous materials, creating an olfactory memory of the dwelling's history. Smoke stains create dark patterns that map the prevailing air currents, while splashes of food, bodily fluids, and various household activities leave their own marks on the surfaces. Furniture, such as it exists, serves multiple functions that would horrify modern hygiene standards. The same wooden table used for food preparation also serves as a workspace for various crafts, a surface for treating injuries, and occasionally as a sleeping place for household members or guests. The accumulated stains and wear patterns tell stories of meals, work projects, and intimate family moments, all layered together in the wood grain like some kind of domestic archaeology. Waste disposal in your medieval world operates according to principles of convenience rather than sanitation, creating a complex web of environmental contamination that affects every aspect of community life. Food scraps are fed to animals when possible, or simply thrown outside where they decompose naturally, or are consumed by scavenging creatures. The refuse pile behind your dwelling grows continuously, providing an archaeological record of your meals and daily activities while contributing its own distinctive aroma to the neighborhood atmosphere. This midden, as it's sometimes called, becomes a layered history of household consumption. Bones from countless meals create the structural foundation, while vegetable scraps, spoiled food, and broken household items form distinct strata that mark the seasons and years. During dry periods, the pile becomes a dusty, fly-infested monument to medieval waste management. During wet seasons, it transforms into a soggy, fermenting mass that generates its own heat and releases complex organic vapors that can be detected several houses away. The creatures that inhabit these refuse piles create their own secondary hygiene challenges. Rats, mice, and various insects find abundant food and shelter in the decomposing waste, then venture into nearby dwellings, carrying with them whatever diseases and parasites they've acquired in their garbage-dwelling lifestyle. Scavenging birds, dogs, and occasionally pigs help reduce the size of these piles, but also spread waste materials throughout the community as they carry food scraps to other locations for consumption. The seasonal cycle of waste decomposition creates predictable patterns of odor and pest activity. Spring warming awakens dormant fermentation processes, releasing months of accumulated organic vapors in concentrated bursts that can overwhelm even medieval sensibilities. Summer heat accelerates decomposition and insect breeding, creating clouds of flies and gnats that serve as efficient vectors for spreading contamination from waste piles to food preparation areas. Autumn's cooling provides temporary relief before winter freezing locks odors and contaminants into the refuse, waiting for spring's warmth to release them again. Human waste presents its own challenges in a world without indoor plumbing or systematic sewage disposal. The privy, if your dwelling boasts such a luxury, consists of a simple wooden seat over a pit that serves the entire household. Privacy is minimal, ventilation is poor, and the accumulated contents create an environment that would challenge even medieval sensibilities. The medieval practice of calling gardy-loo before emptying chamber pots into the street represents one of the few concessions to public safety in an otherwise haphazard waste management system. This warning cry, derived from the French garde à l'eau, meaning watch out for the water, gives pedestrians perhaps 3 or 4 seconds to find shelter before the contents of someone's night activities come cascading down from upper-story windows. You've learned to recognize the telltale creak of a window opening above, the slight pause that precedes the warning call, and the particular quality of voice that suggests someone is about to dispose of something particularly unpleasant. Quick reflexes and an intimate knowledge of doorway locations have saved you from countless unwanted showers of liquid waste, though your clothing still bears the stains from occasions when your reactions weren't quite fast enough. The recipients of these aerial deposits, stray dogs, occasionally pigs, and unfortunate late-night pedestrians, create their own secondary hygiene challenges. Dogs that have rolled in human waste bring that scent with them wherever they go, spreading it throughout the community like some kind of aromatic infection. Pigs, ever efficient in their consumption habits, eagerly devour whatever falls within reach, transforming human waste into future pork with an efficiency that medieval people find entirely practical. The streets themselves serve as open sewers, collecting not only human waste, but also food scraps, animal droppings, dead animals, and various industrial wastes from shops and crafts. The tanners contribute their share of rotting flesh and caustic chemicals used to process hides. The butchers add blood, bone fragments, and spoiled meat that didn't sell. The brewers dump their spent grains and sour ale, creating fermenting puddles that attract clouds of flies and release their own distinctive aromas. Walking through these streets requires a particular skill that medieval people developed from childhood, the ability to navigate through ankle-deep muck while avoiding the worst accumulations of waste. Your shoes, such as they are, provide minimal protection against the liquid filth that seeps through every crack and seam. The sensation of cold, wet refuse penetrating your footwear and soaking your cloth. Foot wrappings become so familiar that you barely register it consciously. Rain, when it comes, helps wash some of this material away, but also creates muddy, treacherous conditions that make walking through the village a challenge requiring constant attention to footing and careful navigation around the worst accumulations of filth. The runoff carries with it a concentrated essence of community waste, flowing in brown rivulets toward whatever low-lying areas serve as natural collection points. These temporary streams leave behind high water marks on building walls, staining the wood and stone with evidence of the periodic floods of urban waste. The smell of medieval streets represents a complex mixture that includes every aspect of community life. Human and animal waste, rotting food, industrial processes, wood smoke, and the general accumulation of organic material create an olfactory environment that modern noses would find overwhelming. Medieval noses, adapted through constant exposure, register these smells without conscious awareness, though particularly strong odors still command attention. Your bedroom, such as it is, presents its own hygiene challenges that compound throughout the months and years of medieval living. The straw mattress that serves as your bed absorbs sweat, skin oils, and various bodily fluids night after night, creating a complex chemical environment that would fascinate and horrify modern scientists. This straw, changed infrequently due to the labor involved in gathering and preparing fresh material, gradually compresses and decomposes, creating an environment that supports its own ecosystem of insects, mites, and microorganisms. The process of straw decomposition creates its own distinctive chemistry. The organic material, compressed under body weight and moistened by human fluids, begins to ferment and break down in ways that produce their own characteristic odors and textures. What begins as relatively fresh, sweet-smelling straw gradually transforms into a dark, compacted mass that retains moisture and harbors countless microscopic life forms. The creatures that inhabit your mattress operate on schedules that intersect uncomfortably with your sleep cycle. Bed bugs emerge from their hiding places in the straw to feed on your blood during the night, leaving behind itchy welts and the distinctive sweet, musty odor of their presence. Mites, too small to see but numerous enough to cause constant irritation, burrow into your skin and create persistent itching that disturbs sleep and creates scratch marks that often become infected. The woolen blankets that provide warmth retain every scent and stain they encounter, building up layers of human essence that would require industrial-strength cleaning methods to fully remove. These blankets, woven with considerable effort and too valuable to risk damage through frequent washing, develop their own characteristic aroma that becomes associated with rest and comfort despite its objective unpleasantness. The lanolin from the original sheep wool, combined with years of human contact, creates a distinctive smell that medieval people recognize as the scent of warmth and security. The interaction between unwashed bodies and unwashed bedding creates chemical reactions that produce their own unique aromatic signatures. Sweat, containing salt, proteins, and various organic compounds, reacts with the natural oils in wool and the decomposing straw to create complex scent profiles that would challenge modern perfumers to replicate. These smells, concentrated by body heat and confined by heavy bedding, create an intimate olfactory environment that becomes deeply associated with rest and sleep. Sharing sleeping spaces, as most medieval families do by necessity, means that personal hygiene issues become communal challenges. The accumulated odors of multiple unwashed bodies, combined with the effects of close quarters and poor ventilation, create sleeping environments that would challenge even the most tolerant modern sensibilities. The absence of effective deodorants or antiperspirants means that body odor represents one of the most constant and democratic aspects of medieval life. Physical labor in heavy clothing, combined with limited opportunities for washing, creates distinctive personal aromas that serve as olfactory signatures for each individual. These scents, while perhaps objectionable to other eras, become familiar and even comforting markers of identity and belonging in medieval communities. Medieval medicine's understanding of hygiene operates according to principles that often contradict what other eras might consider logical or effective. The theory of humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, suggests that health depends on maintaining proper balance between these bodily fluids, rather than achieving cleanliness as later periods would understand it. This medical framework means that treatments for various conditions often involve deliberately introducing substances or conditions that other eras would consider unhygienic. Bloodletting, one of the most common medical procedures, creates open wounds that are expected to heal naturally without the benefit of sterile conditions or proper wound care. The instruments used for such procedures are cleaned casually, if at all, and often serve multiple patients without any attempt at sterilization. The herbal remedies and folk treatments that form the backbone of medieval medicine often involve the application of various organic materials to the skin or consumption of substances that would challenge modern food safety standards. Poultices made from animal dung, plant materials of questionable identification, and various fermented substances are applied to wounds and injuries with confidence in their healing properties. Your hands, as the primary tools for most daily tasks, accumulate a comprehensive collection of medieval life. Food preparation, waste disposal, animal care, craftswork, and personal hygiene all leave their traces on your fingers and palms. The absence of effective hand-washing facilities means that these accumulations transfer freely between tasks, creating opportunities for cross-contamination that would horrify modern food safety experts. Eating with your hands, as most medieval people do for most meals, means that every bite of food carries traces of everything your hands have touched since their last minimal washing. Bread serves as both food and utensil, absorbing flavors and substances from fingers that have handled countless other materials throughout the day. The communal aspects of medieval dining compound these hygiene challenges. Sharing eating vessels, using the same serving utensils, and eating from common dishes ensure that everyone's germs and accumulated hand bacteria become part of the meal. The medieval practice of sharing drinking cups and bowls creates intimate contact between multiple mouths and the various microorganisms they harbor. Kitchen hygiene in your medieval world operates according to principles of practicality rather than cleanliness. Cooking surfaces are cleaned by scraping rather than washing. Food storage relies on salt, smoke, and fermentation rather than refrigeration. And the concept of sterile food preparation belongs to a world with different knowledge and resources. Food spoilage is managed through acceptance rather than prevention. Slightly rotten vegetables are trimmed and used. Meat with questionable freshness is heavily spiced or salted, and dairy products are consumed in various stages of fermentation. The medieval palate, adapted to these realities, finds nothing unusual in flavors and textures that other eras might find alarming. Water quality represents one of the most fundamental hygiene challenges in medieval life. Wells and streams collect runoff from fields fertilized with human and animal waste, creating drinking water that carries its own collection of organisms and dissolved materials. Boiling water for safety is impractical for daily consumption due to fuel limitations, so most people simply accept whatever their local water source provides. The taste and appearance of medieval water varies dramatically depending on its source and the season. Spring water might be relatively clear and fresh, while well water can be brackish, cloudy, or strongly flavored with dissolved minerals. Stream water carries whatever has washed into it from upstream communities, farms, and natural processes. As evening approaches and you prepare for another night in your straw bed, surrounded by the accumulated scents and substances of medieval living, you reflect on how completely different your relationship with cleanliness has become. What once seemed like basic human necessities now appear as luxuries belonging to a world with different priorities and possibilities. The very concept of being clean has evolved to mean something entirely different, not the absence of dirt and odor, but rather the management of these inevitable conditions in ways that make life bearable. The ritual of preparing for sleep in medieval times involves its own hygiene considerations that would seem foreign to other eras. You carefully shake out your clothing before folding it, not to remove wrinkles, but to dislodge any insects or debris that might have accumulated during the day. The process often reveals small beetles, moth larvae, or other creatures that have taken up residence in the warm folds of fabric, creating tiny discoveries that have become routine parts of evening preparation. Your evening ablutions, such as they are, consist mainly of removing the outer layer of dirt from your hands and face using whatever water might be available. This water, often cold and carrying its own collection of particles and organisms, provides more psychological comfort than actual cleansing. The rough cloth used for this purpose has served the same function for weeks or months, accumulating its own patina of use that makes it questionable whether the cleaning process actually removes dirt or simply redistributes it. The process of undressing for sleep involves removing layers of clothing that have absorbed the day's activities and odors. Each garment, as it comes off, releases its own contribution to the evening's olfactory symphony. The sharp scent of dried sweat, the earthy smell of outdoor work, the smoky residue from countless fires, and the distinctive aromas that come from close contact with animals, food, and other people. Your skin, freed from the constraints of rough fabric, shows the marks and irritations that come from constant contact with unwashed wool and linen. Red welts where seams have chafed, patches of roughened skin where fabric has rubbed repeatedly, and the overall texture that comes from limited washing and harsh soap. Settling into your straw mattress, you become aware of how your own scent mingles with the accumulated odors of the bedding and the close quarters of your dwelling. The intimacy of medieval living means that everyone's hygiene challenges become shared experiences, creating a community bound together by common acceptance of conditions that other eras might find intolerable. The darkness that settles over your village brings no relief from the hygienic realities of medieval life. Night soil collectors, where such services exist, begin their malodorous rounds. Chamber pots are filled and await morning disposal. The accumulated odors of the day settle into the still air, creating an olfactory landscape that tells the story of a community living according to very different standards of cleanliness and comfort. As you drift toward sleep, the various scents and sensations of medieval hygiene fade into the background of consciousness, joining the countless other adaptations that make life in these times possible, if not always pleasant. As the last candle flickers in the great hall and the final embers of the hearth settle into glowing ash, you find yourself facing what might be the most alien aspect of medieval life, the night itself. The darkness that surrounds you now is not the gentle, controllable darkness of your modern world, but something deeper, more profound, and infinitely more mysterious. You make your way through the stone corridors of the manor house, your bare feet silent on the cold flagstones. The rushes scattered across the floor rustle softly beneath your steps, releasing the faint scent of dried herbs and flowers that were woven among them weeks ago. Lavender, rosemary, and sweet woodruff. Their fragrances were meant to ward off both insects and evil spirits, though you're beginning to wonder if the medieval mind truly distinguished between the two. The wooden stairs creak as you climb toward the sleeping chambers, each groan of the timber echoing through the darkness like whispered warnings. In your time, you might have reached for a light switch, illuminated a hallway, banished the shadows with the simple flick of a finger. But here, in this world of eternal twilight, darkness is a living thing that breathes and moves and watches. The very architecture of this place seems designed to amplify your unease. The stone walls, thick enough to withstand siege warfare, create an acoustic chamber that catches and holds every sound. Your footsteps, though soft, seem to echo endlessly. The scratch of your fingernails against the rough stone as you feel your way forward sounds like claws on wood. Even your breathing seems amplified in the corridors, bouncing back to you from invisible surfaces. You pause at the threshold of what will be your sleeping chamber, a space you would share with anywhere from 6 to 12 other souls, depending on the size of the household and your station within it. Privacy, that precious commodity you've taken for granted your entire life, simply doesn't exist here. The very concept of a private bedroom is as foreign to these people as their world is to you. The chamber before you is larger than you expected, but still impossibly crowded. Several massive wooden bed frames dominate the space, each one built to accommodate multiple sleepers. These aren't the neat, individual beds of your world, but communal sleeping spaces where bodies press together for warmth, where breath mingles in the cold air, where the sounds and movements of others become part of your own journey into sleep. The beds themselves are architectural marvels of discomfort. The frames are solid oak, built to last generations, but the sleeping surfaces would make your modern back weep in protest. Rope stretched between the frames supports the mattress, and when we say mattress, we use the term quite loosely. What you're looking at is essentially a large sack stuffed with straw, hay, or if you're particularly fortunate, feathers from geese or chickens. You approach one of these beds and press your hand against its surface. It crackles like autumn leaves, the straw shifting and settling beneath your touch. There's no give to it, no gentle cushioning. It's more like sleeping on a barely contained haystack. And that crackling sound, that will be your constant companion throughout the night, every movement announcing itself to everyone in the chamber. The straw inside these mattresses tells its own story of medieval life. It's not the clean, golden straw of your imagination, but material that's been recycled from animal bedding, mixed with chaff from grain processing, and seasoned with the dust and debris of daily life. As you press your face closer, you catch whiffs of the barnyard, of musty grain stores, of the countless insects and small creatures that make their homes in such organic matter. The blankets draped across these beds are heavy wool, thick and coarse against your skin. They smell of lanolin and smoke, of the sheep they came from and the fires that warmed the rooms where they were woven. In winter, these blankets become literal lifesavers, trapping precious body heat in rooms where your breath fogs in the air and ice forms on the inside of windows. But these aren't the clean, processed woolens of your modern world. The fleece has been washed, yes, but with harsh lye soap that strips away softness along with dirt. The natural oils of the sheep remain, giving the wool a greasy texture that clings to your skin. The weaving is uneven, creating thick spots that bunch and thin areas that provide little warmth. But it's not just the physical discomfort that would challenge you. The very ritual of preparing for sleep in medieval times follows patterns that would seem bizarre, even frightening, to your modern sensibilities. Watch as the other members of the household begin their nightly preparations. They don't simply change into comfortable sleepwear and brush their teeth. Instead, they begin with prayers, lengthy, elaborate prayers that serve as both spiritual preparation and psychological armor against the terrors of the night. From ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night, good Lord, deliver us, whispers an elderly woman as she kneels beside her sleeping space. Her words are not mere superstition, but genuine protection against forces she believes are very real and very dangerous. Her voice trembles slightly, not from age, but from genuine fear of what the night might bring. You watch as others make the sign of the cross over their beds, sprinkle holy water in the corners of the room, and place protective amulets beneath their pillows. Small bags of herbs hang from the bed frames, not for pleasant dreams, but to ward off evil spirits and prevent nightmares from taking hold. The medieval understanding of sleep is that it's a time of vulnerability, when the soul partially leaves the body and becomes susceptible to attack from supernatural forces. Each person has their own variations of these protective rituals. A young mother carefully places a sprig of rowan wood beneath her child's pillow, whispering ancient words that predate Christianity, but have been absorbed into the faith. A merchant arranges small iron nails around his sleeping space, believing that evil spirits cannot cross lines of cold iron. An elderly knight sleeps with his hand on his sword hilt, ready to defend against both earthly and supernatural attackers. The preparation continues with the careful arrangement of religious artifacts. Crosses are positioned where they can be easily grasped in the dark. Prayer beads are wound around wrists. Some people sleep with their hands folded in prayer, maintaining the protective posture throughout the night. This isn't about comfort or relaxation. This is about spiritual survival. Women braid their hair with particular care, not for beauty, but for protection. Loose hair during sleep was considered an invitation to supernatural interference. The braids are often woven with protective charms, blessed threads, or small religious medals. The act of braiding becomes a meditative prayer, each twist of hair accompanied by whispered supplications for safety through the night. As you settle onto your own crackling straw mattress, you begin to understand why medieval people approach sleep with such trepidation. The darkness around you is absolute. No streetlights filter through windows. No digital clocks cast their gentle glow. No electronics hum with reassuring life. This is the darkness that humans experienced for thousands of years before electricity banished the night, and it's profoundly unsettling. Your eyes strain against the blackness, creating shapes and movements where none exist. Your modern brain, accustomed to constant stimulation and light, begins to play tricks on you. Shadows seem to shift and move. The rustling of straw becomes footsteps. The settling of wooden beams becomes whispered voices. You're experiencing what medieval people simply accepted as part of the night, the thin boundary between the real and the supernatural. This darkness is not just the absence of light, but a presence in itself. It presses against you like a living thing, filling your nostrils with the scent of cold stone and old wood. Your skin prickles with awareness, every nerve ending alert to dangers both real and imagined. In your world, darkness is temporary, controllable, banished at will. Here, it's a fundamental force that must be endured, survived, negotiated with, rather than conquered. But the psychological challenges are only the beginning. The physical realities of medieval sleep would test your endurance in ways you never imagined. The temperature in the chamber drops steadily as the night progresses. Without central heating, without even a proper fireplace in the sleeping quarters, The cold seeps through stone walls and wooden shutters like a living thing. You pull the heavy wool blankets closer, but they're rough against your skin, scratchy and coarse. The lanolin in the wool creates an odd, greasy feeling, and the weight of the fabric is oppressive. Yet without these heavy coverings, you would freeze. You begin to understand why medieval people slept in their undergarments, and sometimes even their day clothes. Warmth trumped comfort every time. The sounds of the night begin to penetrate your consciousness. In your world, night sounds are muffled by insulation, by walls designed to keep the outside world at bay. But here, every sound carries. You hear the night watch calling the hours from the courtyard below, their voices echoing off stone walls. 1 o'clock, and all is well. But the very need to make such proclamations suggests that all is not always well, that the night holds dangers that require constant vigilance. From somewhere in the manor comes the sound of someone coughing, a deep, racking sound that goes on and on. In your time, you might dismiss it as a cold or allergies. But here, where medical knowledge is limited and antibiotics don't exist, that cough could be consumption, plague, or any number of diseases that turn minor ailments into death sentences. The sound is a reminder of how fragile life is in this time, how close death always lurks. Other sounds drift through the darkness. The scratch of rats in the walls, their claws clicking against stone as they search for food. The hoot of an owl from the courtyard, which makes several people in the chamber mutter protective prayers. Owls being considered harbingers of death. The distant howl of wolves from the forest beyond the manor walls, a sound that sends primitive shivers down your spine and reminds you that wilderness and danger are just beyond these thin walls. As you lie there, trying to find a comfortable position on your crackling straw mattress, you become aware of the breathing of the others around you. Deep, steady breathing from some. Restless tossing and turning from others. The occasional snore that would be amusing in your world, but here seems to echo through the chamber like thunder. Someone near you is grinding their teeth, the sound sharp and unnerving in the darkness. But it's not just the sounds of other humans that fill the night. Medieval people believed that sleep was a time when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds became thin, when demons and spirits could more easily influence or attack the vulnerable. The darkness around you is filled with the whispered prayers of people trying to maintain their spiritual defenses throughout the night. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, someone whispers in Latin, the words barely audible but spoken with fervent belief. These aren't simply bedtime prayers, but active spiritual warfare against forces that medieval people considered very real and very dangerous. You try to settle into sleep, but your modern mind rebels against the conditions. The straw beneath you seems to harbor all manner of life. You feel tiny movements, the rustle of insects or mice that have made their homes in the bedding. In your world, such conditions would be unthinkable. Here, they're simply part of life. You share your sleeping space not just with other humans, but with the entire ecosystem of medieval domestic life. The blankets, despite their weight and warmth, carry their own challenges. The wool hasn't been processed with the chemicals and treatments of your time. It retains natural oils and odors that would seem overwhelming to your modern senses. The smell of sheep, of lanolin, of smoke from countless fires, all woven into the very fibers of your covering. As the night deepens, you begin to experience what medieval people called the night fears. These weren't simply psychological phenomena, but were understood to be actual spiritual attacks. The darkness seems to press against you, filled with malevolent presence. Every creak of the building becomes a footstep. Every shift of shadow becomes a lurking threat. Your rational modern mind tries to dismiss these fears, but the environment itself seems designed to nurture them. The absolute darkness, the unfamiliar sounds, the physical discomfort, all combine to create a state of hypervigilance that makes true rest nearly impossible. You begin to understand why medieval people developed such elaborate spiritual defenses against the night. The cold continues to seep through your coverings, settling into your bones with a persistence that no amount of wool can fully defeat. Your feet, despite being tucked beneath the heavy blankets, feel like blocks of ice. Your breath creates small clouds in the frigid air, and you pull the rough wool up to cover your mouth, trying to create a pocket of warmth. But warming the air you breathe brings its own challenges. The wool against your face is scratchy and carries all the odors of its origins and use. The lanolin creates an oily feeling on your skin, and the smoke from countless fires that has permeated the fabric makes your eyes water. Comfort, in any sense that you understand it, is simply not part of the medieval sleeping experience. Hours pass, or perhaps minutes. In the absolute darkness, time becomes fluid and uncertain. You find yourself drifting in and out of a shallow, restless state that barely qualifies as sleep. Your body, accustomed to the support of modern mattresses and the comfort of climate-controlled rooms, rebels against these conditions. The straw beneath you has compressed and shifted, creating uncomfortable lumps and hollows. What little cushioning it provided initially has given way to the hard rope supports beneath. Every position you try brings new discomfort. Your hip bones press against the rope. Your shoulder finds no soft spot to settle. Your neck can find no angle that doesn't strain against the unforgiving surface. And then, just as you begin to drift into something approaching real sleep, you're awakened by what medieval people called night terrors, but not the psychological phenomenon that modern medicine recognizes. These are the actual terrors of medieval night, the sounds and dangers that make sleep a constant battle against fear. From somewhere in the manor comes a scream, sharp, sudden, and filled with genuine terror. In your world, you might assume it's a nightmare, someone crying out in their sleep. But here, screams in the night could mean anything. Attack by bandits, fire, disease, supernatural visitation. The scream is followed by running footsteps, urgent voices, the sound of people responding to genuine crisis. The chamber around you erupts into activity. People sit up in their beds, making the sign of the cross, reaching for their protective amulets. Whispered prayers fill the darkness as everyone prepares for whatever danger might be approaching. You realize that in medieval times, the night truly was dangerous in ways that your modern world has forgotten. The commotion eventually settles, but sleep, already elusive, now seems impossible. Your nervous system, flooded with adrenaline from the sudden awakening, keeps you alert and anxious. In your time, you might reach for your phone, check the news, reassure yourself that all is well. But here, information doesn't exist. You simply have to lie in the darkness, wondering and worrying, until exhaustion finally claims you. When you do finally drift into something approaching sleep, you discover another challenge that medieval people accepted as normal. The shared nature of the sleeping space means that your rest is constantly interrupted by the movements and sounds of others. Someone gets up to relieve themselves, climbing over bodies to reach the chamber pot in the corner. Someone else has a coughing fit that wakes half the room. Privacy, that fundamental concept that shapes so much of your modern life, simply doesn't exist here. Every aspect of human existence is communal, including sleep. The sounds, smells, and movements of others become part of your own night experience, whether you welcome them or not. As the darkest hours of night settle over the manor, you experience what medieval people considered the most dangerous time, the period between midnight and dawn, when evil forces were believed to be at their strongest. The darkness seems deeper, more oppressive, the cold more bitter, the sounds more threatening. You find yourself doing what the people around you are doing, reaching for spiritual comfort in the face of physical and psychological challenges. Your hands find the rough wooden cross that hangs around your neck, not because you necessarily share their beliefs, but because the ritual provides some small comfort in the alien darkness. The hours crawl by with painful slowness. In your world, if you couldn't sleep, you might read, watch television, browse the internet. But here, there is nothing to do but lie in the darkness and endure. No entertainment exists to distract from discomfort. No conveniences exist to improve your situation. You simply have to accept the conditions and hope for the mercy of eventual unconsciousness. Around you, others seem to manage better, but you begin to realize that their apparent comfort comes from a lifetime of adaptation to these conditions. They've never known the soft mattresses, climate control, and privacy that you consider basic necessities. Their expectations of comfort are so different from yours that what seems unbearable to you is simply normal life to them. The cold continues its relentless assault. Despite the heavy blankets and the warmth of bodies pressed together, the chill seeps through everything. Your toes have long since gone numb. Your fingers, even tucked beneath the wool, feel stiff and clumsy. The tip of your nose, exposed to the frigid air, feels like ice. You begin to understand why medieval people often slept in their clothes, why they layered every piece of fabric they owned onto their beds, why they sometimes brought animals into their sleeping spaces for additional warmth. Survival trumped comfort every time, and the night was truly a battle against the elements. As the night wears on, you develop a new appreciation for the simple act of sleeping through till morning. In your world, a full night's sleep is expected, almost guaranteed. But here, it's an achievement. Between the physical discomfort, the cold, the sounds, the fears, and the constant disturbances, continuous sleep seems almost impossible. You drift in and out of consciousness, never quite reaching the deep, restorative sleep that your body craves. Each time you begin to settle, something awakens you, a sound, a movement, a surge of cold air, or simply your own discomfort. The night becomes an endurance test rather than a period of rest and recovery. And then, just when the darkness seems eternal, just when you begin to wonder if morning will ever come, you hear it. The sound that medieval people waited for through the long, dangerous hours of night. The roosters crow, cutting through the darkness like a sword of hope. But it's not just one rooster. From all around the manor, from the village beyond, roosters begin their ancient announcement of dawn's approach. The sound is answered by church bells in the distance, calling the faithful to the first prayers of the new day. The darkness that has held you prisoner for what feels like eternity begins, slowly, to retreat. The other people in the chamber begin to stir, sitting up in their beds, making the sign of the cross, offering prayers of thanksgiving for surviving another night. You realize that for medieval people, each dawn was a small victory, each morning a gift that couldn't be taken for granted. Slowly, painfully, you sit up on your crackling straw mattress. Your body feels like it's been beaten. Your back aches from the unforgiving surface. Your muscles are stiff from the cold and the constant tension of trying to find comfort where none existed. Your eyes burn from the smoke and dust that permeate everything in this world. As the first pale light begins to filter through the wooden shutters, you can finally see the chamber clearly. what you discover doesn't improve your opinion of medieval sleeping arrangements. The rushes on the floor are scattered and dirty, mixed with debris that's better left unidentified. The beds look even more uncomfortable in the light than they felt in the darkness. You stand slowly, your body protesting every movement. The stone floor is ice cold beneath your bare feet, sending shivers up your legs. The morning air is sharp and bitter, making you pull the rough wool blanket around your shoulders like a cloak. Around you, others seem to accept these conditions with resignation, if not comfort. They've known no other way of life. But for you, with your modern expectations and experiences, this single night has been an ordeal that would be difficult to repeat. The physical discomfort, the lack of privacy, the constant cold, the sounds and smells and fears, all combine to create an experience that challenges everything you understand about rest and recovery. As you join the others in preparing for the day ahead, you realize that your experiment in medieval living has taught you something profound about human adaptability and the luxury of your modern world. The people around you aren't particularly hardy or tough. They've simply never known anything different. Their expectations have been shaped by their reality, just as yours have been shaped by yours. The night is over, but its lessons linger. You've experienced darkness as medieval people knew it, absolute, filled with danger, conquered only by dawn's arrival. You've felt cold as they felt it, penetrating, persistent, defeated only by layers and shared warmth. You've known discomfort as they knew it, constant, unavoidable, accepted as part of life's texture. Most importantly, you've learned that sleep itself, that simple, necessary function that you've taken for granted your entire life, was once an achievement, a nightly victory over cold and darkness and fear. Each morning was a celebration, each dawn a triumph, each new day a gift that couldn't be assumed. As the manor begins to wake around you, as the first fires are lit and the day's work begins, you carry with you a new understanding of just how profound the changes have been between medieval times and your own. The night has ended, but its teachings remain, reminding you that comfort is not a given, that safety is not assured, and that the simple ability to sleep peacefully through the night is one of the greatest luxuries of your modern world. The medieval night has released its hold on you, but you'll never again take for granted the soft mattress, the warm room, the privacy, and the security that allow you to sleep peacefully in your own time. Sometimes the greatest gift of traveling to the past, even in imagination, is the appreciation it brings for the present and the profound gratitude for the simple miracle of a good night's sleep.